Before the video does begin, right now is a great time to pick up some gamer subs. They're currently releasing a bunch of new waifu cups, new flavors, and the great part is if you use my code CODESPADA, you can get yourself free shipping for any orders over $39. So if you want to support the channel and also treat yourself to some gamer subs, well, feel free to use CODESPADA. Alright lads, just so the Nightmare Difficult guild quests are officially returning. In this case, starting this upcoming Monday, we are going to have the Nightmare Quincy Ritter guild quests. That will be for phase number 1, and then phase number 2 will have us go against the ranged REAPER Nightmare guild quests. This of course is giving us a great opportunity to test out and try our powerful new characters. I'm looking forward to trying to beat them, no guarantee if I even can, because remember the Nightmare guild quest itself does have some very tanky enemies. In this case, the first boss itself is going to always have 29 million stamina, while the final boss is going to have upwards to 45 million. The defense stat for most of these bosses are going to be 4,500, which means if you are using a normal attack damage character, which is something that I do recommend, you want to make sure they have above 4,500 attack stat, because otherwise they are going to be doing 1 damage. As always, the best way to go about doing that is making sure your characters have attack level 10, making sure they have level 20 link slots, with some good characters as links, and also most importantly, when possible, always have a team boost in your team with enough recharge so they can stack that boost every 20 seconds. With that, they'll be getting an extra 33% attack, focus, and defense if you are using any of these characters, but more specifically, if you're using any of these characters, they are going to give you a 43% attack, focus, and defense increase. The attribute order for phase number 1, where we are going against Quincy Ritters, it'll be speed, power, mind, heart, and also technique, therefore making it, if you are able to use a power character, they're going to be most optimal here, given that they do have attribute advantage against the final boss, the boss with the most stamina, and attribute disadvantage against the first boss, who has the least amount of stamina. Of course, in this case, they ideally want you to use someone like Aaroniero. And then phase number 2 is letting us go against a mind, heart, technique, power, and then also speed character, therefore making it, if you are using a technique character, they will have attribute advantage against the final boss, allowing them to do more damage. But at the same time, the fourth boss being a power character, it means they're going to be a tad bit weaker against them, but hopefully they make up for it on the final boss. With that in mind though, now let's have a closer look at the actual characters and best teams to bring for this upcoming Nightmare guild quest. So starting off with phase number 1, we have the ranged Quincy guild quest, which you will see doesn't have that many good characters. And that is why there is a lot of importance on this end of month banner, given that we finally have a good lead for this upcoming guild quest. When it comes to the 2 characters you can bring as a lead that will actually be good, you have 2 options: Halloween Toshiro or Aaroniero, the new cyberpunk version. Now, Toshiro has been the lead for the last couple of so months since its introduction. He's been the go-to character that a lot of people have been using. Unfortunately, I myself do not own him. And while Toshiro is going to be a really good character, understand this time around, the final boss in particular does have attribute advantage over Toshiro. So Toshiro will be doing less damage against the boss with the most amount of stamina, which might hurt him in terms of beating this quest. So right now, Toshiro is in a way performing at his worst because, again, the final boss is a technique character. But in future potential Nightmare guild quests, Toshiro should perform relatively fine. I think he'll perform relatively fine right now, but he is being slightly nerfed in favor of Aaroniero, given that Aaroniero is the newest character, right? Now, for those that don't know what makes Toshiro good, he overall has a good damage output. He was designed for guild quests after all. His kit is very weird, but it is good for guild quests, a very stationary kit where his SA3 is a trap effect, which has a very high chance of inflicting freeze, allowing Toshiro to get an 80% SP boost. And then Toshiro himself also does more damage to frozen enemies, and that pairs well with his SA2, which is a barrage attack, which allows him to do a good amount of damage to any enemy that is stationary, frozen, which is what his SA3 does do. Toshiro, of course, is going to be a very good lead, but ideally the character you want to use here is going to be the new Aaroniero, especially because, again, this time around he does have attribute advantage. Now, Aaroniero is a character that is also kind of designed for guild quests, right? He's also really good in limit break and any other piece of content, but in terms of his guild quest potential, he's going to be very similar to someone like Ichigo, the true Shikai version. He has a good strong attack kit, has an increased chance to apply weakening, which will of course then allow him to do more damage, but most importantly give him an 80% SP boost. But of course, one of the unique things about this Aaroniero is that he does have the 2-stage charge strong attack, which is very similar to the Getsugu Jujutsu attack, where you get initial attack out, you charge it up for like a second or two, and then you let off an even powerful attack. Now, this attack in of itself is actually really good in guild quests. However, do keep in mind with Aaroniero in particular, it's going to be very awkward, because one of the main things that makes Ichigo good with this SA3 is that because he does apply lacerate, it means if the boss itself itself does get lacerated, they can't damage Ichigo because they only spam their strong attacks. They will never use their no attacks. So they'll basically stand there for like 2 seconds while you just get a free charge up. With Aaroniero, if the initial hit applies weakening, potentially by the time you let off that SA3, the weakening would have wore off. You would then have to reapply it on the final attack itself. But also because you can't apply lacerate, there's nothing stopping the enemies from actually attacking you, which is why it's important potentially with Aaroniero to have a team barrier character to protect him, because otherwise he's going to get hit. But realistically, in my opinion, especially when it comes to the Nightmare difficulty, these are the only 2 characters you want to bring as a main. Anyone else is going to just be very lackluster. This guild quest in of itself doesn't have that many options, so do keep that in mind. When it comes to your sides, what other characters can you bring, assuming you do have Toshiro or assuming you do have Aaroniero? Well, one of your best sides this time around is, of course, going to be Ritter. She's your only no-attack damage character for this quest, so she'll be doing consistent damage output throughout all 5 waves. She's premium. She's been in the game for quite some time. You might have her. It's definitely worth investing to her, because right now, of the characters we can bring for this quest, she's the only no-attack damage character. If you have her paired with Toshiro or also Aaroniero, and then you maybe throw in a team booster, your team honestly should be absolutely golden. Speaking of right, one of your team boosters that you can bring this time around is going to be Christmas Yoruichi. Now, Yoruichi's SA2 is going to give your team a 43% attack, focus, and defense increase. However, given that she is a ranged character, the SA2 itself will not be doing any damage. But at least her SA1 and 3 can do damage, so assuming you can keep your team safe and you don't need any barriers to protect you, the boost effect with the fact that Yoruichi can do at least some damage on her SA1 and 3 should be enough to get you through all 5 waves of this quest. But if you find that not to be working and you find that your teammates are taking too much damage, maybe yourself is taking too much damage, well then, as always, good or reliable, Maid Orihime is going to be a really good character here. 43% attack, focus, and defense increase, +5 barrier for herself, +3 for your teammates, and if they need any immunity from status ailments, Orihime will give them that. So if you know your team isn't going to take any damage, this right now is probably the best thing that you can bring for the ranged Quincy guild quest. Aaroniero as your main, Ritter as your no attack damage character, and then Yoruichi as your team booster while also doing damage herself. If you find that damage output isn't an issue, but you're struggling to keep your team alive, well then replace Yoruichi for someone like Maid Orihime. Likewise, you can do the exact same setup for Toshiro, although I would recommend potentially trying this strategy, which I know works for very hard, but it's kind of unknown right now if it'll work for Nightmare, especially considering that the final boss is a technique character. But since Toshiro is a speed captain storybar, you can do what you do with Yatsu, and by that you bring Akon and also Shinji. Shinji will debuff the enemies, allow you to do more damage, but Shinji also does buff speed attribute captain strong attack damage by 20%, and then in the case for Akon, he's increasing any speed character's strong attack damage by 20%, but also allowing speed attribute story burst to do 40% more damage to any enemy inflicted with a status ailment. In this case, Toshiro is a very easy time inflicting freeze, so these 2 characters, while they themselves won't be doing any damage, they will be giving Toshiro a lot more damage. So if you can reliably group up the enemies, use your strong attacks, this team hypothetically should work. Prior to Aaroniero releasing, this was the best team that you can use for the very hard guild quests, and it can clear very hard relatively fast, so it should be good for Nightmare. But again, right now for this Nightmare GQ in particular, it might be a bit of a struggle, given that again the final boss is a technique character. So it might not work this time around, but in the future, whenever the final boss isn't technique, it should work. Onwards to the second phase, in this case the ranged Soipa guild quest. For a killer that is widely available as a Soipa, you would think that there's a lot of great character use here, and it shouldn't be that hard, but I think the options aren't as available as you might think, given that Soipa is a very common killer effect. In terms of leads, you have 3 main characters you can bring here. The first one, of course, is 7th anniversary Ichigo. Good damage output, frenzy +1, 80% SP boost, very good chance to inflict weakening and also paralysis, especially with his SA2. The SA2 in particular is going to provide great crowd control, basically ensuring that anytime a new wave does start, you're going to kill all the mini-mobs and then trap the boss, likely paralyze them in the process. A character that is technically better than Ichigo is going to be Noel, but I think for most people, Ichigo would be a lot better here, given that he is a premium character. It's more likely you have more dupes into Ichigo over someone like Noel, for example. But in the potential chance you have equally the same investment on Ichigo and Noel, Noel might be the better outcome here. They basically have the exact same damage output. The only difference is that Noel has weakened defense on her soul bomb. And then your third go-to character might be 6th anniversary Aizen. Consistent damage output, good crowd control. But with Aizen as a main, you're probably relying on your sides to do most of the damage. The sides this time around honestly aren't too bad. In this case, what you can do is use Tokinada. He's a ranged Soipa killer with a boost SA2, good damage output, consistent damage output at that. Always a go-to for a lot of players. Likewise, you can use Ori and Orihime. You can use the newly resurrected Kiryu, and of course, the new character they are selling to us. We can also use the new Cyber Orihime. In her case, you're going to get a really good character in this quest. Flurry +2, a boost SA2, which also for the first time does provide some good crowd control, given that she does also have a tracking vortex. Not like it's needed given that Ichigo will do the exact same thing, but that is something to keep in mind. Likewise, what's also important to understand is that even though she can provide quote-unquote good crowd control, the SA2 itself unfortunately is classed as a melee attack, so it's actually not providing any crowd control. I might have already spoke about it on the channel, but the hope is for Caleb to fix that, because right now that's a massive oversight, since that's the big selling point for this character, is the fact that she's a good NAD character for GQ, is a team booster, but also is a first of its kind where she can also provide good crowd control, assuming the attack it can even hit enemies. But yeah, Orihime is going to be really good regardless of that SA2 is classed as a melee or ranged attack. In this case though, I think the general team that most people will bring here is Ichigo as a main, Orihime as your team booster, and then your first character can be a few different things. You could just bring another NAD character like Rose, Tokinada, Kiryu, for example. If you want to, you can maybe put 6th Anniversary eyes in there. If you are maining with 7th Anniversary Ichigo though, I recommend using Academy Shuhei. Academy Shuhei is very similar to Akon in the sense that he will give a Mind Sworper character 20% more strong attack damage and also 40% more damage to enemies that are inflicted with a status augment. This is going to allow Ichigo just to get significantly more damage, especially when paired with a good team booster and NAD character again like Orihime. If you don't have Orihime, what you actually can do is use Kiryu. Kiryu herself is also a Mind Sworper, so she will also get the extra 40% damage from the buff that Academy Shuhei is given. Again, you can mix and match in this case. Ichigo I recommend to be most people's lead here. You can use Kiryu, you can use Orihime, the other Orihime, you can use Tokinada as your team booster, you can use 2 NAD characters. But I would recommend if you have Academy Shuhei and you are using Ichigo as your main, probably put them on the team. And then with a team booster, like Orihime for example, you honestly should be absolutely golden. As always with this team, the more dupes the better, the easier it will be to clear this quest. This team in particular is actually the team that I plan to use, but I definitely will be trying out different combinations, and I'm potentially hoping to use the new Orihime, assuming I do pull her in this upcoming banner. So with that said, lads, that was the video for today, going over the best teams and characters you can bring for this upcoming limited time Nightmare difficulty quest for the Range Sworper and also Quincy Summer to GQ. Range Sworper should be relatively easy for most people. Again, surprisingly, not that many options given that it is a Sworper killer, but I'd like to think if you've been playing this game for a while, you should have access to a lot of good characters here. The one that I think most people will struggle with is the Quincy Ritter Guild quest, because right now there's only 2 good leads, Toshiro and also Okiura. And then again, in terms of no attack damage characters, you have Ruruka, who hasn't been in a banner quite some time, despite it again being premium. You might have access to her, but new accounts maybe not. But then if you're a new account, you're probably struggling with Nightmare GQ anyway, and that's something you're going to eventually work towards. I have full confidence that I'll be able to beat the Sworper Guild quests, but I definitely know I'm not beating the ranged Quincy Ritter Guild quest unless I pull Okiura. I plan to pull on the end of my banner, but I only intend to do 10 steps, so if I get him, I get him. If not, it's not a big a deal. I'll probably get him by the time this next returns, and I'll be able to hopefully beat it by that point. I'm not that stressed about it. If I can't beat it, I can't beat it. If I can, that's great, more rewards. I'm confident I should at least get into the 5th boss, where I still then get more rewards, but I think whether I beat it or not really comes down to if I do pull Okiura, because I unfortunately don't also have Toshiro. Either way, hope you guys enjoyed the video. See you guys next time, take care, and peace.